let's talk a little bit, Don, about how deeply personal your book is, because you talk a lot about your family and you talk very movingly about your grandmother in particular, who you pronounce
Mommy,
mommy,
mommy.
mommy, mommy. And you write, I know that you lived with her when you were a little boy. She had a fifth grade education. You tried to help her learn to read. And talk to us about how this shaped you personally, but also your view of the world.
Oh, this always gets me. So I was growing up and my grandmother was my life. I loved her. So, I mean, just loved her. And the funny thing, we would be together and they would wonder why was this white lady with this black kid when, because my grandmother was, as they say, mulatto, right? She came from mixed parents but that was back in the day. So, but we were always together. We were thick as thieves. And I didn't realize that my grandmother just had a fifth grade education. Like, you don't know that when you're a kid, but I remember doing my homework around the kitchen table. And I don't know, how you grew up, but we had these, aluminum cabinets, these white, like metal cabinets, and, the little like plastic chairs, but it was kind of the kitchen that everybody had in the 50s and 60s. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I would sit,
Yeah.
and this one was
A lot
yellow.
of vinyl.
Yeah. And yes. And every couple of years we'd get another one. Either it was yellow or, baby blue. And then later it became olive green, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so we would sit around this yellow and white kitchen table, that had the yellow phone on the wall with the cord that went around the house. And so I would do my homework and I would ask my grandmother to try to help me. And she would sit there and, her presence would help. And then, but very quickly I got to the point and I realized that she really couldn't help me, that she wasn't helping me. And then, so I would just sit and talk to her and she would tell me about all these stories as we were reading. So I think that was what she was doing, was trying to throw me off the trail or overcompensating, because she would tell me stories if I would ask her about things. So she would go and tell me stories. And then she would tell me stories about going to vote and how she couldn't go vote. She would just give all these old stories and and when I was coming up, baby, and blah, 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 blah. And one of the stories was about voting and how they would make her count the jelly beans in the jar. My mom would take her to vote, and how they would the number of bubbles in a bar of soap and all kinds of things and poll taxes. And I couldn't believe it. And one day I just started crying. And I was like, my grandmother, I can't believe that my grandmother couldn't vote. That was just so weird to me. Or they tried to stop her from voting. And how was my grandmother in her, I guess at the time in her 40s, maybe, or 50s, how could she not know how to read? Like, doesn't everybody learn how to read? Like, I didn't understand those things. And then from that moment on, Katie, I wanted to read. I wanted to be like the best reader ever so that I could teach my grandmother how to read. Because I just thought it was just unfathomable to me that someone was not allowed to have an education, or that the circumstances of her life prevented her from getting an education. So I learned how to read quickly. And the biggest part of that was sitting around that table with my grandmother so that I could eventually teach her how to read as a first or second grader.
And did you?
I did. And my grandmother and I would sit there and we would read my little Fun with Dick and Jane books. See Dick run, run, Dick, run. Look at Jane and Dick play, those kinds of things. And I would do my, the teacher would give you word lists and you'd have to say, other, right? And you would say, and I would sit there with my grandmother and we would do our homework together and we would learn to read together. And that was my experience growing up with my grandmother. I still miss her to this day.